I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is UN Insider.
Coming up.
There are great opportunities and real dangers. Syrians and the international community need to get the next phase right.
Navigating rapid changes in Syria. The Security Council looks at where things stand a month after an abrupt power shift.
The latest IPC analysis shows that half of the population, or nearly 25 million people, are facing acute food insecurity levels.
A dire outlook in Sudan as fighting rages and civilians struggle with hunger and famine. And helping the visually impaired stay informed. How a specialized newspaper delivers more than just the headlines. Next.
Diplomats here at the UN are starting 2025 off with a focus on the Middle East region. It has been 1 month since opposition groups took control of Syria. A new government is taking shape, but the country's future is still uncertain. Security concerns remain, and more than 1 million people in the country are still in need of assistance.
The situation in Syria is at a critical stage with daunting challenges. The international community should strengthen solidarity and coordinate its actions to support and help Syria achieve stability and development.
There is calm in the streets of Damascus, but there is still fighting in some parts of the country. UN officials are also concerned about potential attacks from ISIL, as well as Israeli military activity in Syria. Members of the interim government are meeting with leaders of other nations, asking for support and relief from sanctions. That could clear the way for additional humanitarian aid.
Decisions taken now will determine the future for a long time to come. There are great opportunities and real dangers. Syrians and the international community need to get the next phase right, and the UN stands ready to do everything we can to facilitate, to help, and to support.
Shu Deja is monitoring developments inside the UN and has more on our top story. Deja.
Yes, Elaine. As we enter the second week of the new year, it's clear that everyone's still adjusting to the work pace. However, this week brought some notable developments at the United Nations. During her final Security Council session on Sudan, U.S. Permanent Representative Linda Thomas-Greenfield announced her departure as President-elect Trump prepares to take office later this month.
Despite the devastating reality they face, for all the disappointment that I couldn't do more, that we, all of us, didn't do more, I still remain hopeful. Hopeful that the representatives sitting around this table, the colleagues who have become friends, will continue this sacred mission, this ultimate responsibility. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the Security Council also held a session on Syria. Syria's permanent representative, Qusay Ad-Dahak, stressed that all foreign forces should leave Syria to its own people. He also urged Israel to withdraw its presence from southern Syria. On the Chinese side, Permanent Representative Fu Cong voiced his great concern about senior military positions in the Syrian army being granted to foreign terrorist fighters, including members of the Turkish Islamic Party, TIP, a known terrorist group.
It is reported that the Syrian army has recently granted senior military ranks to a number of foreign terrorist fighters, including the head of a council-listed terrorist organization, the Turkestan Islamic Party, also known as the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. China is greatly concerned about this. We call on Syria to fulfill its counterterrorism obligations and to prevent any terrorist forces from using the Syrian territory to threaten the security of other countries.
Geir Pedersen, the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Syria, reiterated the UN's commitment to engaging with the caretaker government to advance the political process.
We are ready to work with the caretaker authorities on how the nascent and important ideas and steps so far articulated and initiated could be developed towards a credible and inclusive political transition.
However, a key question remains. How will the UN engage with the Security Council-listed terrorist group beyond its current humanitarian efforts?
Mr. Pedersen and other UN officials are doing their work based on a mandate given to them by member states. It doesn't imply recognition. It doesn't mean we're violating any Security Council resolutions.
So it doesn't matter they are still a terrorist group.
It's not that it doesn't matter, is that we have a mandate to fulfill, and we're fulfilling it. There are other parts in the world where we have to talk to groups who may be on lists as well, and we do it because they're the de facto authorities in a place, and we have to do it to fulfill our mandate. So and it doesn't stop us from condemning actions when those actions need to be condemning wherever they occur in the world.
Now, turning to Gaza. Over the weekend, an Israeli attack targeted a World Food Program convoy in this area. It's hard to keep count of how often such incidents have occurred.
We heard this many times, that the Israeli militant forces, they shot WFP UN-related convoys. This one, I don't believe you mentioned the excuse or rather any response from the Israeli authority. But let me wind back the clock a little bit earlier to all other incidents. Do you have any of those incidents that UN received any explanation from Israeli authorities?
I don't think there's an explanation for shooting at a clearly marked convoy from the World Food Program, whose movements,
or maybe
excuse me, whose movements had been completely coordinated with the Israeli security forces. We don't know if it's an issue of command and control, if a message got lost. We don't know, right? And I think our colleagues at the World Food Program are trying to get the answers.
In other news, the UN released its World Economic Situation and Prospects report. It projects global economic growth to remain steadily at 2.8% in 2025, unchanged from 24. This raises the question, how might Trump's tariff strategies impact these projections?
I think previous experience shows that people do respond to tariffs in different ways. And so one has to look at what comes out of the wash, as it were, when these moves and counter moves have actually played out. So in our modeling, we prefer to wait for some of these strategic moves by countries to actually play out. And that gives us a more stable basis for projecting forward.
Oh, speaking of Trump, this week he made some particularly bold statements. During a press conference, the president-elect suggested he wouldn't rule out using military means to acquire Greenland and the Panama Canal.
Can you assure the world that as you try to get control of these areas, you are not going to use military or economic coercion?
No.
And can you tell us a little bit about what your plan is? Are you going to negotiate a new treaty? Are you going to ask the Canadians to hold a vote? What is the strategy?
Yeah, I can't assure you, you're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two.
How has the UN responded?
Do you think that would be a right thing to do from the UN's perspective?
It's
not about the administrations,
far be it for me to advise any administration or oncoming administration. So I think that's a good question to ask analysts.
But go ahead.
Thank you, Deji. As I said, one administration at a time, and I'm also not going to get dragged in a Alice and Wonderland hole into speculative comments.
Interestingly, both Panama and Denmark, Greenland's governing nation, are current Security Council members. What do they have to say, or perhaps not to say, on this matter?
You must notice that President-elect Trump actually said he's not ruling out the military options to acquire the canal.
I heard that.
Yeah, so do you feel concerned?
I don't feel anything.
As for accusations that China is controlling Panama Canal, here's what Chinese Ambassador Fu Cong had to say.
And China is not controlling, but China is important user of the canal. And we have been working closely with the government of Panama.
And that's all from me for now. Back to you, Elaine.
Shuduja, thanks. There is a renewed push to reach a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. Talks resumed in Doha, Qatar, but the humanitarian situation in Gaza is desperate. Israel's military operations and a lack of adequate access to aid have ravaged the Palestinian enclave. UNICEF says at least 74 children were killed in Gaza in just the first 7 days of 2025. There are also reports of children dying due to hypothermia. UNICEF says increasing aid deliveries is a matter of life and death for children in Gaza.
Some 5,601 people were killed in Haiti last year as a result of gang violence, an increase of over 1,000 on the total killings for 2023, according to figures verified by the UN Human Rights Office. A further 2,212 people were injured and 1,494 kidnapped.
Gangs remain in control of large areas of Haiti, including most of the capital, Port-au-Prince. The Caribbean nation has been in turmoil since the 2021 assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. This week, troops from Guatemala arrived to join the UN-approved Kenyan-led security force that is trying to help Haiti's national police restore order. The UN's High Commissioner for Human Rights is urging the international community to support that mission and to help stop the flow of weapons getting into the country. Let's take a look at some of the other issues on the UN's agenda.
It's not circulating in humans, but it is jumping into humans who are exposed, particularly those exposed to poultry or to the dairy cattle, the two sort of groups where we're seeing most of the movement from animal to human, but we're not seeing sustained circulation.
The WHO says the risk of humans contracting bird flu remains low. That word comes after the death of a patient in the U.S. who had underlying health conditions and was exposed to sick birds. Secretary General Antonio Guterres says he is profoundly saddened by the major earthquake that shook southwestern China. At least 126 people were killed. Tremors were also felt in Nepal, Bhutan, and India. 5 countries are settling into their new roles as part of the UN Security Council. Denmark, Greece, Pakistan, Panama, and Somalia will occupy non-permanent seats through 2026.
Coming up.
Today we have 733 million people in chronic hunger in the world, 2.8 billion people that don't have access to healthy diets.
UN Insider.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Sudan is currently the only place in the world where famine has been confirmed. Hunger and starvation are spreading because of the decisions being made each day to continue to prosecute this war, irrespective of the civilian cost.
Half of Sudan's population now faces high levels of acute food insecurity, and the crisis is spreading. Famine has taken hold of 5 areas of the country, with more than a dozen others at risk. Ongoing conflict and challenges in successfully getting aid to those in need are adding to the concern.
The conflict in Sudan has been going on for 20 months now. At present, the fighting is still raging, civilian casualties keep on rising, displacement keeps on increasing, and food shortages and frequently occurring infections are more acute with each passing day. Given such a grave situation, the international community should not and cannot stand idly by.
Hunger and food insecurity impact hundreds of millions around the world. A recent UN report estimated 1 in 11 people globally and 1 in 5 on the African continent suffer from hunger. The UN and other organizations are working to bring down those numbers. I sat down with Maximo Torero, chief economist for the Food and Agriculture Organization. What are some of the urgent matters that need to be addressed when it comes to food, one of the most basic necessities?
There are 3 drivers that are affecting food insecurity: climate, conflicts, and slowdowns on downturns. We know that because we already have transpassed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, that the frequency and the in-depth of the climate events will increase. We also know that many economies of the most vulnerable countries are facing significant challenges of debt distress, and they have to pay significant amount of their resources in interest because of the debt that they have. And the exchange rates of these countries have also devaluated enormously because of what is happening in the world in terms of global inflation and increase of global interest rates. This makes them more vulnerable because they don't have liquidity to pay and to buy the food import bill. So those things need to change, and need to change abruptly right now to be able to create a transformation. That's where we see an opportunity with a global alliance. I think the important thing is to have good food for all for today and tomorrow. And that's the sustainability part. And that's where we need to find ways in which we can produce more with less, be more efficient to supply what we need today, the right of food, but also to be more sustainable through just transition so that we can gain efficiencies and redistribute better food so that people can have food for tomorrow.
And of course, we are here in Brazil. Brazil has suffered some major climate events this past year, some massive flooding in areas, and then we also had this unrelenting drought. What are some of the strategies that have been discussed to help not just Brazil, but other countries deal with the impacts of that?
We know climate won't have borders. Climate won't matter if you are rich or poor. We have seen it in Brazil, we have seen it in Spain, we have seen it in the US, we have seen it in Africa. So we need to create resilience. For the countries that have resources, like developed countries, high-income countries, they have more capacity for that. They have more capacity of resilience. But the vulnerable countries is the ones that we need to support to increase the resilience. And the way to increase resilience has 2 components. The first one is we need to prevent. And those are early warning systems, One Health approach, and insurance, catastrophic insurance. But the second component is how we can absorb the shock if the shock happens, because the shock will happen. And that is where social protection will play a crucial role, school feeding programs, things that can target the most vulnerable, but also productive projects. We need to prioritize investments and ensure that we have trade. Because if I only produce from me in my country, I will be affected by a climate shock, then what I do? So trade will be central to increase the resilience. We need to combine both trade openness plus production locally so that we can increase resilience of country.
Given the amount of geopolitical tensions around the world and the ever-changing nature of who's at the top at the time, are you optimistic from these meetings here at the G20?
So we are optimistic because for us and for FAO, and that's why FAO is working so hard in the Global Alliance, we believe that this government, the G20 of Brazil, and President Lula especially, has created a political momentum. And the G20 countries are pushing for that. So that's a huge opportunity. But the Global Alliance has 3 pillars: knowledge, the policy basket, financing, and the action at the country level. We are sure that the policy basket will work because we are working on it. We know that there is evidence. We are ready to act at the country level, but if the financing pillar doesn't achieve its goal of coordination, complementarities, and put a clear commitment to coordinate financing, this will be very difficult. So we hope these three pillars really come to reality.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
UN Insider.
No war, no one again, he can hold him guns. Words, protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Saturday marked World Braille Day. The UN estimates at least 2.2 billion people around the world are visually impaired. In at least 1 billion of those cases, impairment could be prevented or is yet to be addressed. Rates of unaddressed near vision impairment are greater than 80% in some parts of the world. In Guatemala, more than 100,000 people are blind or have partial vision. Nearly a decade ago, publishers of one public newspaper took steps to reach this community by printing a newspaper in Braille to keep them informed.
No se sabe con exactitud cuántas personas hay con discapacidad, tanto visual como auditiva. No hay un dato exacto que nos permita a nosotros decir dónde están, dónde es donde hay más necesidades. Mi nombre es Edilzar Castro Quirós.
Ratificado por 20 estados, juramentan al nuevo ministro de...
Soy el director de la División de Educación y Rehabilitación del Benemérito Comité Pro Ciegos y Sordos de Guatemala.
Publinews Braille.
Y el Publinews Braille surge como una alternativa para que una persona tenga acceso a la información en general, acceso a leer una noticia, a leer una información que le puede servir bastante, no solo en su conocimiento, sino también en el conocimiento mismo de las circunstancias que están dando a nivel mundial, a nivel nacional, las noticias cotidianas. Y ese aprovechamiento va a servirle a su formación, a su conocimiento, a su acervo cultural, que también es importante no solo en su vida diaria, sino también en su formación educativa.
Mi nombre es María Fernanda Lucero, yo soy la gerente de mercadeo de Publinews Guatemala. Publinews es un periódico gratuito que se distribuye todos los días, de lunes a viernes, con la información más importante para que los guatemaltecos se enteren del acontecer nacional e internacional. En Guatemala surge la idea por un tema de innovación, que después se convirtió en un tema de responsabilidad social, porque cuando empezamos a investigar sobre el acceso a la información de las personas no videntes, nos dimos cuenta que era bastante limitado. Entonces nosotros nos vimos en la necesidad de llevarles un ejemplar especial dedicado a ellos con información importante, que ellos pudieran, de hecho, hasta servirles como un material de aprendizaje, ¿verdad? Porque lo utilizaban también en escuelas y en centros de rehabilitación que personas no videntes utilizan aquí en Guatemala. La expectativa a que nosotros íbamos a lanzar era como estar un poquito enterados. La sociedad en general no está pensada en ellos, entonces que ellos recibieran una edición especial pensada para ellos fue algo sumamente impactante para la vida de ellos y muy agradecidos ellos de que algún medio de comunicación pensara en dedicarles información específica, ¿verdad?
como persona vidente que yo fui, ¿verdad? Uno está acostumbrado a leer con los ojos, ¿verdad? Ya, pero cuando yo quedé ciego, pues dije yo, no, pues de plano, pues ya no voy a poder leer, ¿verdad? Tengo un tope para hacer ciertas cuestiones. Así como lo es PubliNews, ¿verdad? Que nos ha dado esta herramienta, ¿verdad? Con la facilidad del braille, ¿verdad? Nos informamos como cualquier persona vidente, ¿verdad? Nosotros los no videntes también nos informamos por medio de PubliNews. Lo que sí te sé decir es de que PubliNews es excelente, o sea, está excelente el trabajo que están realizando con el braille, o sea, PubliNews en braille.
A medida que se tiene esa oportunidad de lectura, pues también hay oportunidad de intercambiar, de interaccionarse con otras personas, y eso es importante, porque también tienen derecho a la información, tienen derecho a tener cada día mejores recursos para formarse, y es una alternativa, es un vehículo para que estas personas, los discapacitados visuales, puedan informarse, formarse, educarse y con ello poder tener una interacción dentro de la sociedad mucho mejor que si no tuvieran este acceso.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and this is a special edition of UN Insider.
UN Insider serves as an important window for the global audience to better understand multilateral diplomacy.
It's very important for the media to cover the United Nations, to seek to understand and tell the story in ways that the average person in the street can understand.
I think it's very important that the media should contribute to conveying important messages about the reality of today's challenges.
UN Insider has come to the UN, and we at the UN are so grateful to have it here. It is the only dedicated TV program to what is happening in the UN, and it is reaching so many people with, as it says in its title, inside the UN stories.
Media plays an important role in providing objective information across the world.
We think that media has a strong power of uplifting, what we are trying to convey as messages as developing countries.
We need the mobilization of all peoples, of whole government and whole of society, and media can help us to be informed so that we also can make our part.
I think the media is fundamental to enable citizens across the world, first of all, to understand what is the rationale of having the United Nations. It's not that there is one place on planet Earth that will tell the rest of the world what to do. It is a much more complex story.